After dark on the Gascoigne Estate in Barking, the pavement itself seems to bristle. A dim street lamp flickers. Designer jackets glint. A circle of young men measure every stranger with the same hard, silent calculation. "You do not want to be hanging around here," one finally says flat. Cold. A warning that cuts the night in two. This is Helbanians' territory. Outsiders are unwelcome. The streets answer to a new order. Albanian gangsters who have taken these blocks and beyond, enforcing their rule with the twin currencies of seductive wealth and brute violence. By day, the estate passes for any other low-income sprawl. By night, it fortifies a world of lookouts at stairwells, idling engines, and whispers that travel faster than sirens. The promise is as loud as the threat. Fast cars, thicker rolls of cash, a reputation hammered into legend. And if legend fails, force does not. By daylight, the Gascoigne looks ordinary enough, laundry drifting from balconies, kids skittering footballs off brick, the weary pace of a London estate getting on with it. But when the sky drains to violet, the texture changes. The streets acquire choreography. Ferraris and Lamborghinis nose down narrow lanes like chrome predators. Bentleys idle at corners where afternoon prams rolled by. Young men, many barely out of their teens, fan wads of crisp 50-pound notes, wrists heavy with gold Rolexes, as if wealth itself were a uniform and permission slip. They do not burrow into shadows. They curate, and on phones held eye level. A second stage opens. Helbanians as their own broadcasters, cutting trailers for the life they are selling. YouTube and Instagram become neon shopfronts for the brand slick Albanian language. Rap over bass, you feel through cheap headphones, masked faces shining under LED strips, wheels spinning, Bentleys burning rubber against the concrete geometry of the estate. A drone rises above the tower blocks they claim, the camera banking just enough to show vantage and command, before it drops to a tableau of gang members ring-fencing a metropolitan police patrol car. It is not just a flex. It is a thesis statement. Authority can arrive. Authority can be surrounded. The numbers prove the pull. Before the platform slammed the door, the Helbanians' Instagram amassed over 100,000 followers, voyeuristic onlookers, nervous locals, young fans daydreaming themselves into the frame. Every upload sharpened the mythology, an outlaw feed that taught viewers a simple lesson. We are ready. The caption language is a code, but the subtext needs no translation. Guns drip from the imagery, and so do the boasts. AK. 47 seconds. Posted like living emojis. Kalash. Slang for Kalashnikovs. Tossed off in bars and comments as casually as you might mention trainers. On the ground, the aesthetic hardens into routine, and lookouts melt into stairwells, eyes flicking between corners and notifications. Messages ripple. Who is moving? Who is buying? Who is nosing where they should not? Doors open, then do not. Lift doors stall for an extra beat as if listening. The estate becomes part fortress, part film set, a real neighborhood reskinned night after night as the gangs stage. In the tight lanes where headlights splash pale over brick, the choreography extends meat. Handoff. Retreat. The practiced ballet of retail crime that seems to leave no fingerprints behind. The performance is deliberate strategy. The flash cars, chains, stacks, functions as recruitment, billboard, and psychological warfare. It tells rivals the margins are already claimed. Tells police that the crew can afford bravado. Tells teenagers scrolling at 2 a.m. and that this is speed and status condensed into a single swipe. And every story post, every music video, every shot of cash snowing across a living room does the work of 100 whispered promises. The glamour is a lure, the algorithm a conveyor belt, the comments a funnel, but under the gloss, the feed is not only spectacle, it is logistics disguised as legend. It normalizes the presence of soldiers at stairheads and cars, ghosting the same loop at the same hour. It teaches the estate to accept the nightly set piece, the roar of engines, the quick embrace, the sudden hush. It tells the city at large that a new rulebook is in use here, and if the rules are challenged, the answer won't be rhetorical. Before the red and black flag was metaphorically raised over the Gascoigne, another order held sway. In the mid-1990s, old-school British crime families ran these blocks with a parochial ruthlessness that looked backward even as the city changed around them. Their borders were drawn in habit and blood. Their codes were as blunt as the fists they favored. Outsiders who strayed inside, especially people of color, risked a lesson in ownership, the kind you remembered with stitches. The estate was provincial in its menace, a closed loop of local names and long grudges. Then came the era of the king, Delroy Lewis, as he was known on the street, made the estate into a market that never slept. 24 hours a day, crack and heroin moved like the tide, sloshing through stairwells and courtyards, washing up at front doors where desperation knocked. Runners hustled, lookouts whistled, and the money flowed in simple, efficient lines. The operation looked industrial from the outside. No theatrics, just throughput. It worked until it did not. In 2004, the king was taken down and jailed, and with his crown locked away, the night economy lost its foreman. Silence rushed in. Not the peaceful kind, but the charged quiet that follows when a stage clears and a spotlight waits for the next act. That vacuum arrived exactly as the neighborhood's composition tilted. The Balkans were tearing themselves apart. Albania and Kosovo pushed young families outward on currents of fear and uncertainty. Some came legally, some less so, but they came with urgency, with the hunger of people who have already survived the worst. They found rents they could stretch, jobs they could grab, schools that would take their kids. Within a few short years, Albanian threaded itself through the estate's language, until one day it stood as the second most spoken tongue in the area. The shift was visible and audible. New groceries and barbers, new greetings on stairwells, a different cadence in the evening air. When the king vanished into prison and the older British crews thinned, a new calculus presented itself. A younger generation of Albanian men, some raised amid wartime scarcity, most attuned to the signals of opportunity, saw the estate not as a danger but as a hinge. With the previous boss down and the market still breathing, they moved quietly at first, then decisively. Connections hardened into crews. Crews cohered into a banner, Helbanians. The name bridged identity and geography. Balkan pride fused with London concrete. They studied the estate the way an engineer studies a bridge, weight points, choke points, lines of sight, which doors stick, which lifts stall, which corners command a view. They made small adjustments that read as fate, who got warned off which bench, which shop closed 10 minutes earlier, which hallway light stopped being replaced. The drug trade bent toward them, first by rumor, then by habit, finally by necessity. Suppliers learned the new drop spots, users learned the new numbers. The old guard had traded in routine. The new guard added pageantry to control, wealth as billboard, and violence as fine print. By the time locals realized a different flag was flying, it was less a coup than an osmosis. What had begun as a handful of watchful faces became a stranglehold, quiet at noon, iron at midnight. Helbanians now set the prices and the pace. They chose who could sell and who would bleed. and as their grip tightened, they marked out a headquarters that made sense of their method. A building whose bones favored the defender, whose corridors turned raids into labyrinths. Its name would become shorthand for their reign and the next chapter of this story. They chose Rookwood House because the building itself seemed to speak their language. A graffiti-scabbed high-rise with long, interlocking walkways and a miserly number of entry points. It offered everything a street army wants and a raid team hates. From the outside, its brutalist ribs looked tired. From the inside, they formed a chessboard. A single lookout placed 2 floors up could read the whole courtyard at a glance who was coming, who was loitering, who had that too still posture that says, undercover. Doors opened onto corridors that doubled back like questions. Stairwells kinked at odd turns. Lifts stalled just long enough to let a warning travel. The estate had become a fortress by habit. But Rookwood was a fortress by design. Within those concrete arteries, Helbanians ran their business as if the architecture were part of the payroll. Small flats became storerooms. Short hallways became airlocks where one person entered, another exited, and nothing lingered except the smell of bleach and takeaway. Stashes nested inside. Stashes, wraps in cereal boxes, phones in ceiling tiles, metal tucked behind plaster patched to look original. If a sale went wrong on the corner below, the seller did not sprint. He folded back into the building's geometry, vanishing in a way that felt less like escape than absorption. Rookwood was not just an address. It was a body that healed around every cut. And like any body, it had a face it wanted the world to see. In one of the crew's music videos, Rookwood rose behind them bleak, proud, unmistakable. Its exterior transformed into a banner. The camera framed its balconies like teeth. The chorus promised loyalty in Albanian and consequences in any language. Locals turned the volume down, but they could not turn the backdrop off. That image worked twice. It glamorized the footprint for recruits, and it mapped the stronghold for rivals who were wise enough to stay away. Then the city arrived with clipboards and cranes. Redevelopment came wrapped in the language of renewal. Rookwood's days were numbered, bit by stubborn bit. The high-rise was erased from the skyline. A slow-motion amputation that should have wounded the gang. It did not. Power that relies on a single building is a tenancy. Power that survives demolition is ownership. Helbanians slipped their operations to a new locus, a short walk away, near a pub that locals learn to skirt once the streetlights catch. The pub itself is not the point, its proximity is, of familiar corners. A car-friendly loop. Eyes at angles only they seem to know. Around Noinpe. Like the tide hitting a mark, the same faces sweep back into frame. Not a meeting so much as an alignment. Phones rise and fall. A knuckle taps glass. A driver drifts past with that idle, circling patience that says tonight will be like last night unless someone forces a change. Nearby, the estate carries on. A TV leaks laughter through a thin wall. A kid counts steps on a Fitbit. A father drags a bin to the curb and looks down, not out. The gang's presence has settled into the neighborhood's muscle memory. What began at Rookwood has become portable methods that can colonize any building with too many corners, any block with one too many blind turns. The stronghold is now a pattern, a way of populating space until space itself takes their side, and with a base that moves when the map does. The nightly choreography continues. Punctual as weather. Recruitment here does not look like a job interview. It looks like a dream you can touch. The Helbanians know the camera is a net, and they drag it through restless nights until the right fish shimmer toward the light. A teenage boy scrolls past wheels spinning Bentleys and gold-chained choruses, and for a second the concrete of barking feels like a runway. The clip ends on a pile of notes that would take his father months to earn. The caption speaks in Albanian about loyalty, about moving smart, about family. In the comments, a laughing mask emoji sits beside a flame. and somewhere off-screen a message pings. They call new blood falcons. It sounds noble because that is the point. Romance smeared over risk. Falcons are promised the speed and height of the life they see on their phones. A chance to ride shotgun. To hold a motorbike that snarls like a myth. To fan cash for a selfie. To stand just close enough to the throne to feel taller. The first night is often only an errand. Carry this. Wait here. Do not count it. A test with a reward. And a reward that feels like a test passed. Before long, the errands have edges. Move this wrap 3 stairwells over. Sit on this hallway for an hour and say nothing. Ride to the next block and smile when you hand it over. The boy learns the choreography by muscle memory. He learns, too, which smiles are for customers and which are for police. The glamour is not just vanity. It is propaganda with a budget line. Videos and posts are shaped to pull in those who feel shut out elsewhere. Albanian youths who can't see a ladder. Kids of any background who want a shortcut to status. The Helbanians' aesthetic is a syllabus. What to wear, how to speak, which gestures signal belonging. It whispers that money is faster when it is not taxed, that fear is a kind of respect, that rules are for other people. The algorithm does the rest, feeding the same promises in tighter loops until the dream feels inevitable. But the dream has a clause in small print. In this crew, life is as disposable as the next recruit. Punishment is policy, and policy is swift. If orders are ignored or loyalty bends, the response can be a beating metered out with clinical restraint, or a sudden flurry of knives in an alley where the CCTV always seems to blink. Betrayal is not a plot twist here. It is a provocation answered to make a lesson of someone. Stories circulate of boys who miscounted, who skimmed, who talked too freely in the wrong kitchen. No one tells those stories on camera, but everyone hears them. Rivals are managed with the same blend of theater and threat. Lyrics and captions toss barbs like calling cards, and the Helbanians have not shied from naming other outfits. Off the record, on top of the rest, gets taunted in public posts and private grins, dares tossed like coins on a table to see who flinches. This is projection as armor. Declare invincibility until some of it sticks. Crowd the discourse with so much confidence that caution looks like surrender. For the falcon still new to the flock, the lesson lands quickly. The role is runway and red zone at once. Status if he obeys, harm if he hesitates. He learns to carry the phone that never dies. To recognize the knock that means move. To say little and move on time. And when he stands in the late-night glow of the pub's corner, cash warm in his palm, he understands the bargain better than any caption could teach. The glamour is rented. The debt is owned. The price for falling behind is always paid in flesh. What you see on the pavement, the jackets, the engines, the handoffs, is only the skin of a much larger creature. Helbanians are the street face, the visible edge of an enterprise that stretches far beyond Barking's postcodes. Behind the swagger is an infrastructure connections, cash routes, and quiet bosses often described with one loaded phrase: the Albanian Mafia. Call it a network if mafia sounds too cinematic. The point is the same. Its arteries run from Balkan towns to European ports to London flats, where money is counted by the kilo, not the hour. For the National Crime Agency, Britain's nearest thing to the FBI, the pattern is no longer rumor. Their public warnings read like weather reports that never clear. Albanian groups consolidating power with startling speed, tightening their grip on the UK's cocaine economy until the trade's annual billions seem to flow through fewer, firmer hands. The street price drops, purity rises, and the market behaves as if run by operators who treat risk like a spreadsheet and violence like a management tool. Local crews may sell, posture, and bleed, but the upstream current belongs to someone else. To understand the temperament of that someone else, the 1,990 seconds in Albania and neighboring Kosovo were a kiln war, economic collapse, the implosion of a state, and the feral aftermath of pyramid schemes that shredded what little stability people trusted. Young men came of age where institutions were either absent or predatory. Survival meant improvisation, alliances, and a memory for who kept their word and who did not. Some fought. Others learned to navigate black markets that were no longer underground but the only market in town. Those habits did not evaporate when they crossed borders. They calcified into operating principles. Two old words help decode the paradox of how these groups can be trusted. Partners to some, and mortal threats to others. Besa, a promise kept. A hand you can actually shake, without counting your fingers after travels like a passport in the underworld. It signals reliability. If an Albanian broker says a shipment lands on Wednesday, make space on Wednesday. That reputation opened doors that used to close at the sound of an unfamiliar accent. It drew in suppliers and partners who needed one kind of certainty in a trade that offers almost none. Then there is the shadow clause, the kanun, an honor code older than any modern border, with provisions for revenge that make betrayal a debt paid in blood. Cross the wrong man, endanger his money, expose his route, and you do not just risk harm. You trigger a system. That system reaches past London's streets into villages, where relatives still answer the door, where grudges are tallied across generations. The combination Besa to allies, Kanun to enemies, creates a business model, unusually immune to broken deals and informants. It is not that snitches never happen. It is that the math of fear and loyalty makes snitching a rarer bet. Place those codes on a London map, and you get a structure that looks paradoxically modern. Low visibility bosses, compartmentalized crews, encrypted phones, clean front companies, cash wash through casinos and import firms, and a street layer like Helbanians that is loud enough to recruit and feared enough to enforce. The older generation of crime lords dislikes the Instagram noise. Quiet money is safer money, but whether the front is flashy or ghosted, the logic holds. Trust is a weapon, so is memory, and in the space between them, a city learns that the men on the corner are only the tip of a discipline forged in harder times. Some shifts in the underworld feel like mood. This one felt like a merger. For years, Britain's cocaine economy flowed through a chain with many hands and many tolls. South American cartels moved product to Europe. Dutch and Belgian wholesalers parceled it out. British crews picked up, cut down, and sold on. Everyone took a slice, and the price climbed as the purity fell. Then Albanian operators, quiet, patient, relentlessly practical, walked around the old middlemen and knocked directly on the source's door. It was not swagger. It was logistics. The deal they offered to suppliers in Colombia and across Latin America was simple and seductive. Fewer links, faster money, cleaner execution. Albanians had already built reputations for Besa, for delivering what they promised and paying what they owed. They coupled that trust with something rarer, muscle that did not leak. Suddenly, shipments that once ping-ponged through Dutch brokers landed in European ports favored by the new partners. A kilo that used to cost British buyers north of 20 grand via intermediaries could, through these direct lines, be secured for a fraction, 4,000 to 5,000 at the source. Give or take the ocean's variables, margins. Incentives snapped into place. Price is only half of dominance. The other half is quality. With middlemen stripped out, the purity stayed high. No self-preserving dilution at every step. No mystery powders turning white into gray. Bricks arrived cleaner and left only minimally cut, which meant street-level dealers could offer something that undercut rivals on cost, while outclassing them on effect. Overnight, this is how it felt on corners. The market tilted. Users drifted toward the stronger product that did not drain wallets as quickly. Small-time dealers, sniffing profit, followed the supply line upstream and found an Albanian at the end of it. By the 2010 seconds, If you were selling in London, chances were your supplier's supplier spoke the same language as the boys patrolling the Gascoigne at midnight. But the genius was not only in negotiation, it was in structure. Albanian groups did not content themselves with being importers. They built a vertically integrated machine that handled the journey from port to pocket. One team shepherded consignments through Antwerp, Rotterdam, Algeciras, wherever tides and contacts aligned, and another specialized in trucking and concealment, nesting packages inside shipments that looked too boring to search, fruit pallets, building materials, the everyday clutter of continental trade. A third controlled the breakdown depots in the UK, where product was split, stamped, and scheduled, and downstream, regional managers fed city crews. Street teams like the Helbanians enforced territory, kept beats moving, resolved disputes with either a word or a blade. Each node knew just enough to do its job and not enough to sink the hole if pinched. This model starved dependency, where older British outfits had to court wholesalers and dance around shifting alliances. The Albanians owned their pipeline. They set wholesale prices the way a company sets SKUs. They managed stock as if running inventory. They treated violence as risk control, not theater. And when the product occasionally breached public view, a box cracked open at a port, a pallet that smelled wrong to a patrol dog, the loss was absorbed by the scale of the operation. Of insurance, criminal style, diversify routes, compartmentalize handlers, never send a shipment without a shadow plan to explain why that truck was there at all. And at street level, you could feel the new math in 1,000 small ways. Less desperation in the eyes of mid-tier sellers because their margins were healthier. New faces at meet points because the network's reach demanded fresh hands. More frequent, smaller drops to blunt the damage of any single interception, and a vocabulary that betrayed integration. Talk of upstream and downstream, of units and returns. The corporate diction of crime that comes when a gang stops being a crew and starts behaving like a supply chain. The effect on London was not subtle. Cheaper, purer cocaine did what cheaper, purer products always do. It expanded the market. That expansion fattened profits, paid for faster cars and better lawyers, and underwrote the myth that the men at the corners were irreplaceable. They were not. The pipeline was the irreplaceable thing, and so long as it held, the city would keep feeling its pulse steady, efficient, indifferent to the wreckage it left behind. Sometimes the empire shows its receipts. In early 2021, a shipment that looked like commerce bananas from Colombia came off a vessel at Portsmouth Port and onto the UK's conveyor belt of logistics. The border force sliced into the veneer and found the core, dense bricks of cocaine threaded through the pallets, a cache that would total 2.7 tons by the time the counting stopped. Street value? Well north of £200 million. The audacity was not just the volume. It was the camouflage. Investigators would later say an Albanian-led crew had even acquired a legitimate fruit import company in London, a clean face to wear, while the real work moved in the shadows. Follow the trail inland and the plan sharpens. In a Tottenham warehouse, officers watched men tear through banana boxes as if they could will the missing load into existence. Empty cardboard waited for repacking. Suitcases sat ready, less luggage than future ledgers, meant to be filled with cash and shuttled along the network's arteries. The coke was pre-stamped with unique batch marks, simple symbols that told downstream customers which brand they would bought and where to send complaints. Not that anyone takes returns. Hidden in the rafters, a firearm and ammunition. The punctuation mark at the end of the business model. Among those arrested were several Albanian nationals and a couple of non-Albanian associates, proof of a principle the network has never pretended to hide. Cases like Portsmouth and Tottenham are the rare sirens that make the quiet hum audible. Most days, the machine prefers encryption to echo. In 2020, When European police peeled back the lid on EncroChat, the encrypted phone system that traffickers and gun runners treated like a private room, the transcripts read like minutes from a criminal board meeting. In the UK, Operation Venetic turned those keys into raids, and many of the phone's most industrious users turned out to be Albanian operators. The chats revealed scale, rhythm, and tone. Wholesale kilos moving on calendar schedules. Cash washing in cycles. Problem solving that toggled between logistics and menace in a single thread. Consider one of Venetic's aftershocks. A 33-year-old named Bjar Kosmina, living quietly on a busy Wembley high street behind an innocuous door that kept a lot of motion off the books. Kosmina was not a street seller. He was a logistics man. The kind of node who moves weight and money without raising his voice. When armed officers grabbed him in May 2021, they counted nearly £300,000 in cash across 2 properties. Ledgers spelled out a business moving at least 100 kilograms of cocaine worth around £8 million at street level, and laundering roughly £2.5 million. On EncroChat, he would gone by a handle that sounded comic book slick, insatiable beta, and he would broker deals under lockdown's hush, misreading silence for safety. In court, the proof was not just bricks and bills. It was his own words turned inside out. Faced with transcripts of arrangements and boasts he thought no one would ever read, Kosmina pleaded guilty and, in 2024, took a 12-year sentence. The twist that is not a twist. This was not his first dance. He would been convicted in 2012 for conspiracy to supply class A drugs, deported to Albania afterward, and somehow reappeared in the UK under a false identity or hidden in a migration wave to resume the job with better tools and bigger stakes. Remove a cog and the machine swaps in another. Sometimes it is the same cog with a new label. What these episodes prove is less a mystery than a method. Stamp the product. Front it with clean companies. Communicate in ciphers until ciphers crack. Then pivot. Keep the street layer flashy enough to recruit and the upper layer quiet enough to endure. When police lift the lid, the picture is always larger than the bust. Warehouses scripted like stage sets, cash waiting in obedient stacks, guns sleeping above ceiling tiles, and a paper trail so disciplined it feels like a parody of legitimate trade. The Underworld's accounting department is real, and it keeps very good books, right up to the moment those books become Exhibit A. Follow the cocaine and you map a commodity. Follow the people and you map a wound. The same networks that move product move bodies, and the journey to London often begins with a promise that curdles into a price. In village cafes in northern Albania, in apartment hallways in Tirana, in telegram groups and TikTok clips sprinkled with bravado. The pitch repeats. England is a ladder. One video shows a small boat carving a white seam toward the cliffs of Dover, the caption sneering at classrooms and day wages. The cost, whispered later, sounds manageable. The bill that arrives in Britain does not. By 2022, the small boat's route from northern France was no longer a trickle. Some arrivals were fleeing danger that any court would recognize: blood feud threats, domestic abuse, the kind of persecution that does not make the papers, but ruins lives all the same. Others came chasing work and found handlers waiting who called themselves facilitators until the debt matured. The numbers written on scrap paper ballooned. Thousands became tens of thousands. Interest compounding with. Every day the young man breathed UK air. If he could not pay, repayment took a different shape. The man who ferried him across the channel became the man who owned his next months, sometimes his next years. Debt bondage is tidy because it looks like employment to the untrained eye. An Albanian teenager bends under a power washer at a hand car wash for 13 hours. And you think, cash in hand graft. A pair of young men sleep on mattresses near a suburban cannabis grow and you think, cleaners, caretakers. On a building site, a quiet worker takes the worst shifts. the worst scaffolds, the envelope wages, and you think, new arrival paying his way. In truth, the handler holds his documents or threatens his mother back home. The wages are siphoned to service an ever-expanding ledger. Exits are blocked by fear and by the quiet fact of illegality. Victims become invisible because they resemble the city's scenery of hustle. The same pipeline still catches women in its net. The lure is almost always respectable. A nanny job, a hotel post, a restaurant role, and the snare is always the same. Passports taken, debts invented, threats made. Call her Zana, because her real name belongs to her. She was promised childcare work, landed at a London airport with a brisk smile at the gate, and was driven to a flat where the doors shut like a verdict. The beatings trained compliance. The debt explained why she never touched money. The room in Soho became her horizon. A dozen men a day, sometimes more. The hours counted by bathroom breaks and bruises. It took a tip, a raid, and luck to shake her loose. The rescue did not dissolve the damage, and still, the stigma amplifies the trap. For every Albanian who comes to the UK for honest work, and most do headlines that howl, invasion paint the whole community in a single color. Landlords turn colder. Bosses look elsewhere. Paperwork slows. The legitimate doors narrow, and the illegitimate ones swing open because the men behind them speak your language, understand your humor, know the villages you name when you are homesick. They offer cash, a bed, a tribe, and the illusion of choice, when police and charities describe modern slavery. Some people picture chains. The reality is chores and curfews and a phone that never leaves your sight, because it is the only dial you are allowed to turn. What stands between a life reclaimed and a life resigned is often a quiet intervention, a welfare check that lingers, a neighbor who notices a light never goes off, an officer who asks twice instead of once, a charity worker who speaks Albanian and says the word debt like she has carried one too. The pipeline thrives on secrecy and shame. It withers a little under attention and options. But attention is scarce and options are slow. And so the boats keep crossing, the handlers keep counting, and the city keeps confusing servitude with hustle, exploitation with initiative. Cheaper. Purer. Cocaine changed the weather. It did not just fatten profits. It rewired risk across the map, pushing product into new towns by the old county lines method. City crews seeding rural high streets with numbers you could text like a takeaway. Violence followed the routes. Young runners shouldering the danger. Adults refused to carry. In East London in 2019, a boy named Jaden, 14, still learning the city's edges, was murdered in a gang-linked attack that felt like a siren for a wider truth. When the price drops and the purity climbs, the scramble for territory pulls younger lives into older feuds. Not every wound traces back to an Albanian network, but the market they reshaped made blood cheaper to spill. Inside prisons, the echo is unmistakable. Albanians rank among the most numerous foreign nationals behind K-bars, a presence outsized to their population. Wings learn the informal pecking order quickly. Who can get phones through? Who can move spice on a Tuesday? Who can call a debt due with a single message? Some bosses keep the plates spinning from cells, orders whispered through illicit handsets. Errands assigned to lieutenants who answer Poe before the guard rounds the corner. The institutions contain bodies. They do not always contain economies. Meanwhile, outside, a replacement clambers up the ladder, ready to claim the shift the last man left vacant. The Hydra metaphor is not poetry. It is operations research. Cut a head. Two heads compete to replace the margin. For residents near the Gascoigne and estates like it, fear lives next door to routine. A pub owner learns to read the cut of a jacket and the temperature of a room. A mother redraws a walking route for her son, when a certain corner hardens after dusk. Someone scrolls and orders with a postcode and a door buzzer code. 10 minutes later, a delivery arrives with a politeness that feels practiced and wrong. Money flows up and out, leaving council blocks lighter in wallets and heavier in worry. But resignation is not the whole story. Law enforcement and communities have stopped treating the problem like a series of isolated arrests and started treating it like a system. The National Crime Agency works with European partners who know the ports and the phone servers. Border Force learns which banana shipments deserve a second look. Operation Venetic showed what happens when encryption goes transparent. Networks that thought they were invisible suddenly had timelines and names. There are dawn raids that actually dawn on the right addresses, fruit companies that fail the smell test, cafes where the back room stops humming. Every rescued trafficking victim is a notch in the machine. Every seizure dents the schedule. On the ground, a softer counteroffensive unfolds. Youth workers fluent in both English and Albanian stand in takeaway queues and speak in futures. Apprenticeships, training. The dignity of money that does not burn your pockets because it can go in a bank. Programs find kids before captions do. Survivors of exploitation meet caseworkers who understand debt bondage as fluently as slang. The city funds small miracles, an unlocked door at midnight, a hotline that answers in the right language, a shelter where the first question is not papers, but are you safe? None of this is flashy, which is why it works. It builds a parallel mythology, one where exit ramps exist and staying alive outranks staying loyal. The montage at dawn is instructive. A dealer on the estate counts the night's take and thinks in numbers, not names. A user rides the come down in a stairwell that smells like bleach and rain. Across town, a police team debriefs. One less house farmed for cannabis. 2 Vietnamese teens fed and warm for the first night in months. In Wembley, a shutter rolls up on a shopfront that once hid ledgers. The owner across the street notices the quiet, and thousands of kilometers away, in a village cribbed under mountain ribs, a family sees their son off toward England with a blessing that is mostly a prayer. London wakes, and the machine resets. But it is not invincible. It survives on secrecy, on the romance of speed, on the lie that there are no alternatives. Every time a caption fails to recruit, every time a victim decides the debt is someone else's shame, every time a port dog sits down beside the right pallet, a gear slips. The story is not over. It is an argument being made, night after night, between fear and the people who refuse to live by it.